For over 70 years, the story we've been told is simple. Hank Williams, the king of country music, died of a heart attack at 29. The official cause was insufficiency of the right ventricle of the heart, a fancy way of saying his heart just gave out, but the official story isn't the whole story. It's not even the true story. When you piece together the evidence from his final, desperate hours, a much darker picture emerges. It's a story of suspicious injections, a fake doctor, and a lethal cocktail of drugs given to him by the very people who were supposed to be taking care of him. This wasn't just a heart attack. This is the story of how the voice of a generation was silenced. And the real mystery isn't just how he died, but who let it happen. To understand why this all matters, you have to know who Hank Williams was. They didn't call him the hillbilly Shakespeare for nothing. In a career that was tragically short, only about 6 years. He racked up 11 #1 hits and sold millions of records. His songs, like I'm So Lonesome I Could Cry and Your Cheatin' Heart, weren't just catchy tunes, they were raw, honest poems about pain, heartbreak, and longing that would define country music forever. But behind that haunting voice was a man in constant, agonizing pain. Hank was born with spina bifida occulta, a spinal birth defect that tortured him his entire life. That chronic pain fueled a devastating addiction to alcohol and painkillers, especially morphine. By the end of 1952, Hank Williams was a wreck. The Grand Ole Opry had fired him for his non-stop drinking, his marriage had fallen apart, and his body was giving up. Still, the industry making a fortune off his sorrow pushed him to do one last gig, a New Year's Day show in Canton, Ohio. It was a journey he would never finish. The official story goes like this: on December 30, 1952, a massive ice storm grounded all flights. So, Hank hired a 17-year-old college kid named Charles Carr to drive him over 500 miles from Montgomery, Alabama, to Canton in his brand-new, powder blue Cadillac. The trip was a disaster from the get-go. They made it to Knoxville, Tennessee, where a drunk and exhausted Williams checked into the Andrew Johnson Hotel. Worried about the singer's condition, Carr called a local doctor, P.H. Cardwell, to their room. Dr. Cardwell gave Hank 2 injections, reportedly a mix of morphine and vitamin B12. Afterward, Hank was so out of it that hotel porters had to literally carry his limp body back to the car. From there, Carr drove on through the night. His story changed a bit over the years, but the accepted version is that in the early hours of January 1, 1953, he pulled into a gas station in Oak Hill, West Virginia. When he went to check on his passenger in the back seat, he found him cold, stiff, and completely unresponsive. Hank Williams was pronounced dead at a nearby hospital. The story seemed simple enough: a man with a bad heart and a bad habit had finally met his end. A tragedy, yes, but a straightforward one. It was anything but. The whole simple heart attack story starts to fall apart the second you look closer. The first crack? That hotel room in Knoxville. Why would Dr. Cardwell inject an obviously intoxicated and sick man with morphine, a drug known to suppress breathing and heart function? Giving that to someone whose system was already swimming in alcohol wasn't medical treatment, it was unbelievably reckless. Was it malpractice? Then there's the second, even more sinister drug in the mix, chloral hydrate. Just 9 days before he died, Hank had been prescribed this powerful sedative by his so-called personal physician. When mixed with alcohol, chloral hydrate creates a toxic, often deadly cocktail known as a Mickey Finn, a combination famous for shutting down the heart. The prescription bottle found with Hank's body was nearly empty. So in his final hours, Hank Williams was a walking chemical disaster, saturated with alcohol, morphine, and chloral hydrate. The heart attack suddenly doesn't seem so mysterious, it feels like the predictable, almost inevitable outcome of this deadly brew. To make matters worse, a proper, comprehensive toxicology report was never performed. The local coroner in West Virginia was a Russian immigrant who barely spoke English. He performed a basic autopsy and quickly concluded the cause of death was heart failure, without fully investigating the cocktail of drugs in Hank's system. That failure to investigate properly at the time has left the door wide open for decades of questions. asking these questions leads to an even more disturbing thought. It wasn't just what killed Hank, but who let it happen. And for that, we have to talk about the most sinister character in this story, Dr. Toby Marshall. Except, Toby Marshall wasn't a real doctor. He was a conman, a convicted robber and forger who had literally bought his medical degree from a traveling salesman. In the last year of Hank's life, this fraud became his personal physician, promising he could cure Hank's alcoholism. His cure was to prescribe Hank massive amounts of dangerous drugs, including the chloral hydrate that helped kill him. Some reports say it was Marshall who spoke to Dr. Cardwell on the phone from Knoxville and insisted that Card get the gravely ill Williams back on the road to make the show in Canton, no matter what. Why? Why force a man who had to be carried to his car to travel through an ice storm in the middle of the night? The answer, as it so often is, seems to be money. Hank Williams, alive but unreliable, was a problem for promoters. Hank Williams, dead, became a legend and a goldmine. In the immediate aftermath of his death, his record sales exploded. His posthumously released songs became massive hits. And his estate, since he died without a valid will, became the center of nasty, drawn-out legal battles between his family and record labels. This included a secret, illegitimate daughter named Jet Williams, whose existence was hidden for decades until a court ruled she had been a victim of fraud and cut out of her inheritance. While there's no proof anyone wanted him to die, it's undeniable that many people around Hank financially benefited from his death. Their actions in his final days show a shocking level of negligence and exploitation. They weren't trying to save him, they were trying to cash him in. The more you dig into this, the more tragic it gets. It's a story that's been repeated in music history, but Hank's was one of the first and most heartbreaking. If you find these deep dives into the stories they don't want you to hear compelling, take a second to subscribe to the channel. So, has the Hank Williams Sr. mystery finally been solved? Yes. But the answer isn't a single bad guy or a shadowy murder plot. The truth is more complicated and, in a way, much sadder. Hank Williams wasn't murdered by one person. He was the victim of a perfect storm of chronic illness, crippling addiction, and grotesque medical negligence. He was killed by a system of enablers and exploiters who saw more value in his next concert than in his next breath. The official cause of death, a heart attack, was just the final physical event, not the true cause. The real cause was the deadly combination of alcohol, morphine, and chloral hydrate, prescribed and administered by a chain of questionable doctors, ending with the fraud, Toby Marshall. Authorities in Oklahoma even considered manslaughter charges against Marshall, but they couldn't prove exactly where the fatal dose was given, allowing him to escape justice for Hank's death. This was a death that was, at best, completely preventable and, at worst, encouraged by the people who should have been protecting him. That image of Hank Williams, dying alone in the back of his Cadillac, is burned into American music mythology. It's a story that feels as mournful and lonesome as his greatest songs. But the tragedy isn't the poetry of his lonely end, it's the grim reality of how he got there. He was a man crying out in pain, in his music and in his life, and the people around him chose not to listen. Instead, they handed him another drink, another pill, and pushed him back on the road. The official story of a simple heart attack is a lie because it covers up this ugly truth. It sanitizes a story of exploitation and turns a preventable tragedy into a simple medical event. The real story isn't about a weak heart, it's about the darkness that can swallow a shining star, and the cost of fame when there's no one left to protect you from the industry you helped build. What do you believe happened on that final ride? Was it a tragic accident, or the result of cold, calculated negligence? Let us know what you think in the comments below.